If you were able to walk into a room, confident that you would be well received, seen, heard, and appreciated by others, and all it took was a few changes in how you navigate your everyday relationships, would you be willing to make those changes? It is possible to be both fully authentic and to experience the best relationships of your life. Now, here is the host of Navigating Complicated Relationships with behavior expert Michaela Gaffen Stone.
Welcome, everyone. I am so glad you're here today to hear this amazing interview. It's going to be amazing because I have an amazing guest. All right, so I'm not bragging here, but I happen to have a really top-notch guest. So, a little bit of bragging maybe. So I'm Michaela Gaffen Stone. I'm your host of Navigating Complicated Relationships, and I am many things, one of which is a human behavior expert, but I'm also an author, and the gentleman I am interviewing today is largely responsible for getting my work out there. So at least 2 books so far and another one coming up soon. So thank you for that. And the person I'm talking to, of course, is one Corey Poirier. And he is our special guest today called the Enlightened Passenger. And of course, there's a reason for that. And we'll get to the reason. I'm being really subtle here soon. So the book features Robert Stapleton, who's a passenger sitting in 9C. Sounds like a good seat. He's the epitome of success, at least how we define it in North America. He owns the car, he wears the watch, and he talks the talk. Where he falls short is living the life. Masked under all that outward success is a man searching for something more, even if he doesn't know it yet. So I'm not going to read you the whole thing because I'm going to talk to Corey about this. But here's a very interesting book. Before we get into that, though, I would like you, Corey, to introduce yourself, say hi, and let us know a bit about how the whole journey as an author started.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to. And so I guess in a nutshell, how it all got started for me is I grew up in a small town. I was raised by a single mother, and I barely graduated high school. I graduated without knowing the difference between fiction and nonfiction. I didn't read the first book until age 27. And so I always say, in the yearbook, you see where it says most likely to succeed and all those kind of things. Mine never said nothing about the word success. And so I often say it's not about what happens to you, it's about what you do next. And so for me, it was the next that made all the difference. And I'll be very full transparency. The next didn't happen for a long time. Like, it's not like, I had these, let's say, obstacles or challenges growing up, and then all of a sudden I just waved my wand, and then now the next happened and everything went smooth. It was a lot of time and work between in there. So it's been quite interesting. And it's been quite
I would say so. Before we leave the yearbook behind, can you remember what it did actually say?
You know what? Let me think. I think it said, let me see. I'm trying to think what my yearbook did say. I think it was, and there were multiple yearbooks, of course, because there was like a grade in a high school. When you move to grade 9, from grade 9 to grade 10, that's from junior high to high school, and you get like the yearbook then that's kind of finishes off. I mean, you get one every year, but when you go to a new school, that's when it's like what you're likely to have happen. And then there's, of course, your main graduation, which is the one where people get voted stuff. So in the earlier one, it was fellow classmates that said stuff about you. And I mean, I think it was just like most likely to go on tour with the band Poison, not as a member, but like following them around, almost like people follow the Grateful Dead. And then the grade 12, only a small number of people got voted like most likely to whatever, and I just wasn't in the voting at all. So literally all it was my own write-up about what I saw in my future. And honestly, mine didn't say, I will say this. So the only connection to what I do today is it did say something to the effect of, it was third person. So it said Corey intends to start a career somewhere or somehow in business. Like, it didn't even be specific, but that's as far as it got.
And look at you now. You certainly did start a career in business, didn't you?
I do my best.
You sure do. So let's sort of move forward a little bit to how many books have you been involved in now, of your own and facilitating for other people?
So let's see. I literally probably have to do a count to give that answer properly, but I would say so. I was a part of a an anthology series. I'm looking at my wall because that's where the books are. I was part of an anthology series which has 13 books in it. The 13th hasn't been released yet. It's called The Laws of the 13 Steps to Riches. And basically it's the 13 steps to think and grow rich with Napoleon Hill. It's each chapter is one of those laws. And so I wrote in that book series, which is an anthology book series. Plus, we have our Blue Talks book series, which is at 12 now. So right there between those two is 25. And then the other day I came across a book I forgot I had been a part of called Creative Con. That was more somewhat recent. And then I wrote forwards to multiple books. So if you include those, I'd say that probably puts me at around 30 some with anthology books. And then for my own books, I wrote 5 books in a series called Conversations with. And then on top of that, maybe 3 solo books. So I'd say I just did that in real time, which you normally should never do math in real time. But if I just did that in real time to say probably around 38, that would be a guess.
Wow. So going from not having read a book and not knowing the difference between fiction and non-fiction to getting up into the 30s, that's I'm going to say that's some determination. That must take an awful lot of your day to do all that work, all that writing and so on.
Yeah, I mean it's there's different involvements in each of those. A lot of those were write a chapter and be a part of a book. So that's not as bad as writing obviously a full book. And so I'll say this, I type really fast. Um, so I type about 100, I think 110 words a minute. And so if you look at writing a chapter is typically, they usually say 1,000 to 15 words when you write in these anthology books. So theoretically, I could write, well, if you think about 100 some words a minute. So theoretically, in an hour, I could write my chapter.
Right.
So, and so it is interesting to me that whenever I am a part of a book, or even on the other side, whenever we have an anthology book and we help people with those books, sometimes people will say, okay, how much, what's the word length? And I'll say, oh, like in our case, up to 2,000 words. And they'll say, okay, well, how long do I have? And I'll say like 3 months. And like, oh my God, I can never get that done that quick. And so it's weird to me because I'll sometimes realize I'm coming to a deadline in an anthology book and I'll sit down and write the chapter in like an hour to an hour and a half. So it's weird to me, but it's because everybody's at their own place. They write different paces. For some people, they're very analytical. They analyze every single word. And for me, I'm just like whatever's meant to come out comes out. And I'm gonna knock on wood because I've never had writer's block. So like I just decide, okay, I'm gonna talk about the mastermind, like from Napoleon Hill. And then I think like I've run a mastermind for 9+ years. And so I just literally pull from that, as someone who's run a
Okay.
mastermind, et cetera, et cetera.
I was going to ask you about your inspiration. So, you just kind of answered that before I got there, which is cool. And the part about no writer's block, that's interesting to me because, as you know, I believe you know anyway, my husband is a science fiction writer and he's recently branched out into fantasy as well. And he's on his 34th book and he has never known writer's block and he says it doesn't exist. You're doing something with writing where even if you're not putting words on a screen or on a paper. So, there's always some other aspect to the book. Do you find that's how pretty much how that flows for you too?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I guess, well, so I mean, I'm going to be the anomaly. So it's not even for me that, it's truly that, and I feel guilty saying this because I don't want to jinx it. But for me, it's literally when I finally sit down to write a book, it comes to life. Like there's not even like I'm getting like for me, I'm not even getting ready to. I'm not like I just literally sit down
Mhm.
and writing happens. Um, I write music and I started with songwriting at age 12, and that's a little different. Like I find there's every now and then I'll sit down to write a song, and a crappy song comes to life, and then I just say, okay, I'm not ready right now, and I move on. So with that one It's not that I ever sat down and like put up index cards and here's chapter one or whatever, or index cards and say here's the first verse. I literally, and with music, I don't even say I want to write a song about this. I just literally sit down and start playing. And then if I'm in that zone, I'm going to write a song. If I'm not, I'm not going to. Or so, and that's when I know it's not a good one, is when I don't feel in the zone and I'm writing this and I'm like, this just seems like gibberish to me. Now, for somebody else, they could say, oh, that's a decent song, don't throw it out. But it doesn't feel it to me. But I've been so fortunate with that, with whenever I am ready to write, the words reveal themselves.
Which is exactly how Adam says it works for him. He just writes and it flows and off you go, which I love to see in action. Like that's just such a great thing, because when you're in the flow, literally it does just come to life, doesn't it? Which is really cool. I have to say, I did not know that you wrote music. So would we have heard anything, or is it very niche? Like, and what kind of music do you do? You mentioned the band Poison earlier, so is that kind of what you work on?
No. So for me, I have basically I have, let's see here. I write, it's just a hard one for me because music is so subjective in terms of even what style it is. And so for me, it's always been challenging because I don't write one specific style of music. If I look at my last CD, there's a whole story there because I was tone deaf when I started. I still can't tune a guitar by ear. Um, I've had girlfriends, first girlfriend I ever played music for told me I was terrible and to please stop. And so like it wasn't my journey. It wasn't meant to be my journey. I willed it. I put in the 10,000 hours. And having said that, my last CD was nominated for Rock Recording of the Year, which was a really good validation for somebody who was a kid, said, I want to be a rock star, but kind of thought, how does that happen whenever you can't write music? And like, because I couldn't at that stage, right? Like when I was 8 or 10 or whatever, and you don't play an instrument. And even when I started learning to play an instrument, it took forever to learn how to play one song. I just thought none of this is going to come natural. But long story short is that CD validated for me because I did a mini tour, had music on the radio, put out a music video, and had a CD nominated for Rock Recording of the Year. And that, if I look at that CD, even though it was Rock Recording of the Year, there's songs on that CD that you would call not country, but somewhat rock country, we'll call it. There were songs on that CD that definitely a song called You're Lying, which is a blues song, no questions. There's a song on that CD that's like an 80s rock anthem almost. There's songs on the CD that would be hard to describe what style it is. There's stuff that's like folk, like dark folk music. Like so it's hard for me to just put one, this is what I play on it. The album's called Evil Anthems. And the
I need
name,
a copy of this, Corey. I didn't even know you had one of these things. Like, I've known you for quite a while now, and I never knew this. Like, what? This is a secret. What's happening?
well, the last CD was 2014, so it's 10 years ago. And then I kind of went on a break. I'm looking around here to see if I have one, but either way, I'll mail one to you. But yeah, and the name Evil Anthems was inspired by a what's his name? Nick Cave album he put out called Murder Ballads. And I didn't want to write about murder or ballads that way, but I just thought like a lot of my stuff comes out, it's like it's not super poppy or super cheery. So I thought Evil Anthems, like there's songs about these, like one was about a girl that cheats on her man, he catches her, and then the songs about how he lives in a small town and they all judge him because she was like the queen of the small town and they all loved her. And so he finally had to move away and find somebody new. And so it's not a pleasant song, so it's like an evil anthem. So yeah, that's what I called the album, Evil Anthems.
Wow. Okay, so anybody who's listening to this interview right now and knows you probably didn't know that, which I think is fascinating because I've been a coach in your boot camps a couple of times. I've shown up to all kinds of events that you do, and I have never heard this before. So you heard it here first, folks, or at least first since 2014, which I think is just so cool. That's some more depth. I look forward to the CD. I'm going to chase you for that. So just be
Please do.
aware you're going to have to send it to me. And I do still have a CD player. So yes, I can get that. Now we
Okay.
have a break coming up. This has gone really quickly already, but we have so many more questions to explore and see what else we can find out about Corey that he hasn't told us yet. And of course, there is the book, Enlightened Passenger. I promise we'll get to that. So don't go away. You are listening to Michaela Gaffen Stone, and I'm talking with Corey Poirier, and this is just awesome. See you in a minute.
What if your relationships could be a source of delight instead of a source of struggle? In a world where human interactions are anything but straightforward, tuning in to Navigating Complicated Relationships with behavior expert Michaela Gaffen Stone will offer you insights, tools, and a whole new level of understanding for you to use right now. Listen for Navigating Complicated Relationships with Michaela Gaffen Stone, Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Mountain, 9 a.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email become a host at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
This is Navigating Complicated Relationships with Michaela Gaffen Stone. To participate in the program, join the live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. You can also send an email to mickey@gaffenstone.com. Now back to the program.
Welcome back. If you do want to email me, it's MIKKI, I'm not a mouse, at gaffenstone.com, GAFFEN, stone, like a rock.com. And I love getting emails, so let me know what you're interested in, what you think about the interview, and what kind of questions I should have asked and didn't. But hey, let me get to the end before we do that. Now, this program has an amazing producer who, during the break, found the link for Corey's nominee. And if you want to look it up for yourself, it's www.musicpei.com/2015/02/215. Anyway, I'm sure if you put that much in the search bar, you will find Corey in there. She also sent us a picture, but I'm not quite sure how I could show you that. But Corey's looking very cool in it, so maybe we'll get that added to the show notes later. I'll see what we can do with that. But yeah, Corey looking very cool in that image. So do you have fond memories of that? Like, was that something you wanted to do as a career?
It was, so I guess, like I said, this is where it gets kind of wild. And I will say, I tried myself, a shortcut, I think, to actually looking it up is if you just type music PEI and then my name, Corey Poirier, and it's the second link that comes up. So just for those that might listen, we might not have time to mark it all down. I just found it that way. But as far as the memories of it, yeah, I mean, I miss it in a lot of ways. I was really, for a number of years, involved heavily. Like I was playing music, once a week at least. Sometimes, like in the summer especially, it could be 4 or 5 times a week. Like I was really all in, and it was always a side hustle, and I did it for a number of years. But at some point, I realized there were 2 things happening. I was juggling too much. Like I was speaking and quite in demand as a speaker, and I was doing stand-up comedy at the same time. And that was keeping me busy. And when I went on the road, it was easier to do a stand-up comedy show because you need you and a mic. You don't have to bring in a bunch of equipment. And so I was doing that on the road. I was doing speaking. I was writing, running a business. I had a newspaper at that point, and then also the music, and something had to give. So I decided to ultimately put the music and the comedy on the shelf. And for a later date, I haven't, ultimately ever kind of looked. I'll say it, I miss it, but not enough that I've said, when's the later date coming? And but the music and comedy both really filled something that was amazing on the creativity side. But again, I felt A, I couldn't do it justice if I was trying to keep doing it as a side hustle, and B, The other side is that I felt, I mean, music and comedy are great, but they do two things. One, you'll never make as much money unless you make it to the very, 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 very top. So it's hard to pay the bills doing it. And then the other side, which probably most people wouldn't see, not so much the music, but in the comedy, it was impacting my career because people would find out I do stand-up comedy and they're like, oh, wait a minute. So that's the keynote speaker we're hiring? And he's a comic? And it was like a different feel. Like it was like I lost gigs actually because people said, oh, I didn't know you also were a stand-up comic. And it kind of just took away from the credibility I had as a keynote. And then what the big deal breaker moment was, and I stopped both this one day. A client hired me to speak and play music, and I was filling in for somebody else. So like they said, we had an entertainer who had to cancel last minute. Corey, I know you play guitar and do comedy. Can you do our gig? And I had started doing corporate comedy, a bit of corporate music. And so what happened was I went to this event and I was the musician at the door. So when you're walking in, I was playing music to welcome you. And then like once everybody was in the room, I was like, put down the guitar and then running. And then I was the comic. And, I was doing them a favor. There was like 250 people in the room. And afterward, people all saying, I love your joke about this. I love what you did here. I love that song you did when I was going in. But the chairman of their board was offended by one joke. And he canceled my 8 bookings, which turned into probably around $35,000 lost that were all like coming up. And the lady who had booked me, who ran the office, was the one who actually asked me to do the favor. But because he was the chairman, he had more power than her, and he just said, sorry, he's canceled. So I got canceled before canceling was cool. I don't want to say cool, but before canceling was a thing. But yeah, so that day I said, you know what? It's too much. It's been enough of me hearing from people that I maybe didn't get a gig because I was a comic and all that. So I just said, I need to put those at the side, and that's what happened.
So first of all, I am amused by you being ahead of culture. You got cancel culture going before it was even a thing. Like, that you can have a sort of Raspberry Award for that one, I guess. That's quite an achievement. But how did you get into keynote speaking? And before you answer that question, I have one more question, which is, what was the joke? Tell us the joke.
I don't remember. That's the thing. I honestly, so here's the thing. At the time, she speculated as to which one she thought it even was. Like
he didn't even tell you?
Well, he never talked to me at the whole time, not before or again. So like I never talked to him at all. Having said that, what the joke might have been, or sorry, what the joke she speculated was, I can tell you that. And
okay.
The interesting part is I don't say anything whatsoever that's even questionable. It's all implied. I did have a song that I played that was very questionable, but that she said he didn't seem to mind that. He liked the song. Anyway, but the joke, if it's the one that I thought it could be, goes like this. Basically, I started the bit and say, how many people here have ever, or sorry, how many people here have went on blind dates? And then, of course, you'd have a certain amount of audience members that would, say yes, like by show of applause, so you get them clapping. And then I would say, I went on this blind date not that long ago. And partway through the date, I realized I had to end the date, even though I didn't want to. It just made the most sense. I said halfway through the date, she whispered in my ear, I just wanted to let you know that I have scurvy. And so I thought, like, scurvy, isn't that a pirate's disease? Like, when's the last time somebody's had scurvy? And I went into the joke a bit, like I pictured like, the doctor going back to like the 1800s trying to find out what you do when somebody has scurvy. And I asked her how she found out, and she said she noticed that one of her toenails had changed color to black and it had fallen off when she touched it. And so to skip how she said she got scurvy, the end of the joke says, I had to break off the date because I realized the last thing she touched turned color and fell off. And then I look down and say, and that's just not a risk I'm prepared to take. So
okay,
that was the joke, but nothing's really said. It's just all implied.
Right.
Anyway, that's the joke she thought did it.
Wow, and you got cancelled for that. That's pretty dire. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, and the irony of it is the people that were in the room and him would never have been a part of the events that he canceled. Like she was bringing me in to speak to new agents that were just like, basically it was like, let's say they assign 10 new agents every 3 months or whatever that number was. I was like doing a cycle of that. So it was just the new agents. It wasn't even people in the room. He was never going to be in that room. It didn't, in other words, it didn't impact him at all. It just pissed him off because he didn't like the joke.
Right. Well, I guess, if you're the boss, you got the power, right? All
Yeah, and
of
I think life happens the way it's meant to. Like, I feel like it was my last sign that I was meant to take a break and focus on something different. So it worked out.
it definitely pushed you in that direction. So tell me about how you got into keynote speaking, because I kind of envisage you as being a bit of a shy teenager maybe, and you kind of morphed from that person into somebody who's doing music and stand-up comedy, which itself is a huge move, right? You're in front of people. But what inspired you to become a keynote speaker?
So, well, I mean, in the nutshell about how I got into stand-up comedy. I got tricked into performing one night, and one of the comics, after I kept going back and performing, invited me to go see Tony Robbins. And I saw him, and then the person that was with me said, "Can you believe he's making this much money to do this?" And I'm like, "Whoa, wait a minute, people make money doing this?" And then I wanted in because I was going to a comedy club, alcohol involved, not like basically seeing the situation would happen when somebody heckled you, or or it was nighttime, so they weren't there to learn, they were there to be entertained. And then I was like, wait a minute, you can do some of this stuff in the daytime and people actually care to hear your message, and so on and so forth. So that's really what made me go, I want to know more about that. And then how I started that journey is I sold a local community college, on why they should let me teach a sales course. And
Ooh,
I
good
started
thinking.
teaching that sales course, and what happened was they would have companies approach them saying, "Well, we can't send 30 of our employees to, 30 of our employees to come to his session. So is there any way we could bring him into our company to do the training?" And the college didn't care, and they said, "Yeah, you can work it out with him." And so basically, what happened is that's how I started getting my first speaking engagements, basically, or at
I
least
like
it
it.
was my first paid ones, I should say.
Right. That's very smart. So anybody listening who's considering speaking, first of all, Corey is known as that speaker guy. So, excuse me, you might want to talk to Corey about that. But also, think outside the box, because looking at the community college and figuring out a sales course that you could teach them, that's definitely outside the box. Like, I'm very appreciative of that story. That's so cool. And I love how you look at a thing and decide, yeah, I want in on that. How do I do it? And just go for it. I'm not hearing in your language any form of, but there was this block and there was that obstacle and there was this thing stopping me. I'm not hearing that. What I'm hearing is, I see it, I want it, I go get it. Would that sum things up pretty well?
Um, I think so. Like,
Okay.
I think it does.
I mean, I grant you it's a very simple sort of explanation, but I'm not hearing all this sort of sidetracking into stories about why you can't do a thing. It's more, well, that's not working anymore, so I won't do that, but I want to do this. And your focus is always forward. Do you think that's really important? Just briefly, because we have a break coming up in a couple of minutes, but do you think that's important in reaching your goals, is to keep that sort of focus forward?
I think it is, but so here's where it gets weird. I think it's important to keep your focus, and at the same time, I think it's important to be flexible. And they kind of seem like they're countered each other. But I let the journey go like this too. But at the same time, so I knew what I wanted to be doing, and I knew what I felt was how I wanted to do it, like impact lives and how I want to impact lives. But I was a little bit open with how that journey would take me. So, within when I was doing the comedy, I felt that was part of the journey. And I didn't stop it because this won't get me here. It was more because it's now interfering with getting,
Right.
but it wasn't like I kind of stopped it for that reason. Having said that, I will say that it wasn't always easy either. Like the comedy, I said I got tricked into it. Like I never wanted to be on a stage. I thought I wanted to be like a writer. So when you ask like what I want to be kind of when I grew up, or is this what I always want to be? I thought I wanted to be a rock star from the time I was young. But at the end of the day, what I really thought I was going to be is a writer, like writing behind the scenes. Nobody sees me ever. I didn't want to be on a stage. I was terrified of speaking. So all these things are outside of my natural element. So I don't want to make it seem like I came natural to those things. But once I get into those things, I think I felt the waves to see where I was meant to be pushed.
Fantastic. Corey, we are finally going to get to the book in the next segment, but we have a break coming up right now. I'm so interested in all these different pathways that you've taken that it's like, yes, yes, book. I will get there. So don't go away. After this break, you are going to hear about the Enlightened Passenger and what that's all about and why, because this is a really important book for Corey, and I want you to hear about it. So don't go away. We'll be back in just a minute.
What if your relationships could be a source of delight instead of a source of struggle? In a world where human interactions are anything but straightforward, tuning in to Navigating Complicated Relationships with behavior expert Michaela Gaffen Stone will offer you insights, tools, and a whole new level of understanding for you to use right now. Listen for Navigating Complicated Relationships with Michaela Gaffen Stone, Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Mountain, 9 a.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
How wonderful would it be to carry your favorite Inspired Choices Network host with you throughout your day? Well, now you can. Inspired Choices Network now has its very own mobile app. Our free app offers live streaming shows, along with thousands of podcasts and TV episodes. Our shows cover a wide variety of topics. Whether you're waking up with us, carrying us through the day, and taking us to bed with you, we're always here for you to enjoy. We're easy to find. Just search for Inspired Choices Network in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store.
This is Navigating Complicated Relationships with Michaela Gaffen Stone. To participate in the program, join the live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also send an email to mickey@gaffenstone.com. Now back to the program.
Welcome back. You're listening to Michaela Gaffen Stone and Corey Poirier, and this is a really fun and interesting interview. I'm finding it interesting because I'm learning a lot of things about Corey that I didn't know, and I've known him for a while. So I just want to recap briefly. Before the break, you were talking about moving forward, and that forward move is a little curvy. It's not straight, it goes in different directions. That flexibility that you described of not knowing the how, but seeing the end point, I think that is a lesson that people need to take away when you want to reach a goal. That's the way to do it, because if you focus on the how, you're looking down and not up, and you have to look up to get to that vision, right? And I think one of your visions was absolutely this book, that if you're looking at this podcast, if you're watching the show, then you'll see The Enlightened Passenger by one Corey Poirier. Tell us about the book, where it came from, why, there you go. Where did this come from? Why is it so important to you?
So the where it came from, honestly, I basically had I had this idea, and it's the only part I get hesitant about how much to reveal just on the origin story, because I don't want to give away stuff from the book. So I'll just say it was inspired by a specific question, and I thought that'd be a cool concept for a book. And so honestly, the book, the ending was the first part I wrote, which sounds kind of counter to what you normally hear. And then I wrote the beginning. And I say wrote, this was in my head. I should add, this wasn't literally writing it out. It was just, that's what I knew I wanted to be the ending. Then that's what I knew I wanted to be the beginning. It was in my head for a year, where I would, every now and then kind of go, oh yeah, I got to start that. Or, oh yeah, what if I added this here? Like, it was just elements. Like, I didn't decide on the characters' names. I knew I wanted it to be a fictional parable, but I didn't know the meat of it yet. I didn't even know I wanted it to take place in a plane until I started getting close to writing it. And then I was like, okay, well, if I want this to be a conversation between two people, and it's called The Enlightened Passenger, where does it take place? Meaning, it could be a train, it could be a car. Like, where does it take place? And it just, I was flying, as I was trying to think of that, I was flying like crazy on planes. And I finally clued in and said, okay, well, this kind of makes sense. I'm on planes all the time. I live this. And it makes the most sense of meeting a stranger. Outside of a train would work too, but meeting a stranger on a plane where you're confined, you can't even stop. Like where a train, you might stop, halfway through the trip or whatever. So it just made sense to me. And so that's how that part came to life. I knew I wanted to be a fictional parable because at the time I was reading a lot of Mandino, who's got a lot of parables. I was rereading The Alchemist, rereading Celestine prophecy. Like that's the mode I was in. So it felt like the right way to write. I decided on it being a small pocket book because I wanted it. Now, I didn't decide on the amount of words and I didn't limit myself saying it has to be this many words or pages, but I felt I wanted it to be like an Mandino book that you could carry in your purse or in your knapsack or in your even pocket, some guys' pockets maybe. I wanted it to be like that, similar to Og's books. And I feel like once you decide that, the universe then decided how long it would be. Meaning, like, I didn't say I want it to be this long. I feel like knowing that going in, it just felt like the book, the story length wrote itself while I was doing it because it knew that's what I wanted. Now, I don't know if that's true, but that's how it felt to me. And then I sat down to write the words in about 2 weeks on a vacation. I wrote half the book, and then I didn't hardly do anything for the rest of the year. And then I started tinkering away at like 5, 6 pages at a time. So it took me a little over a year to actually physically write this small book. And then from that point, then I was doing like beta readers, getting them to provide feedback and all that kind of stuff. That took, another handful of months. And then I actually planned the launch and then decided if it was going to be with a publisher or not. So I kind of went different than most. And the publisher, the deal breaker was how quick they could turn around the book. So I decided for a couple of reasons. We decided the launch date. I think I partially did it because I want to fast track the publisher. I didn't want to wait 2 years to hold the book in my hand. And so I built a really good launch. And then I went to the publisher who I had already worked with and said, hey, if we want to do the book, it's got to be out in 4 months, which is unheard of, right? Like usually a publisher is like 2 years. And I just said, but they knew all the things I built, there's a chance this book will sell well. And they didn't want to lose those sales to, okay, we can't do it in 4 months. When let's face it, a major news story happens and they turn around a book in 2 weeks. Like you have a big news story, like I'm just randomly throwing something, but let's say Prince passes away when Prince died. They could put a book out in 2 weeks about that, but yet it takes them 2 years normally. So I knew they could do it, but it still was pushed. It was still a lot of work. We were down to the wire to get it done. But I mean, that's kind of the journey of the book. The book itself is about two strangers on a plane. One old guy, one young guy. Young guy is a business person who thinks he knows it all. He pays for first class for himself and the empty seat because he doesn't want anybody sitting next to him. Falls asleep, wakes up to an older guy sitting next to him. The old guy tells him he was bumped up from economy because the plane was oversold, and the young guy wants to go to sleep and ignore him. But he finds out the old guy's made some money, and he wants to know how he made that money so he can make his own money. And so he listens to him or placates him, whatever we want to look at it. He's the reluctant then passenger. But what happens is it's called The Flight That Changes Everything because the older guy teaches the young guy it's about being rich as a person, not just financially. And it's done through the older guy's journey, him sharing his journey and story, and it's 10 life lessons that basically is loosely based on my life. They're based on the 7,500 interviews I've done with some of the world's top thought leaders. In fact, the stories in the book are really my stories fictionalized. Like it talks about me playing music. It talks about Treb as the character playing guitar. It talks about, and he played at the Cavern Club like I did. He got a tattoo of John Lennon in Liverpool like I did. Like it's really loosely my life. When he learns about synchronicity from Les Brown backstage, it's actually me learning from Les Brown in his living room in Atlanta, the exact same thing. So it's really my life. And what I did discover after I wrote it is the two characters are each part of me. That Robert, the younger character, is me when I was in business and I thought I knew it all. Even though I wasn't arrogant, I thought I knew it all. And then now, hopefully, I'm working closer to the enlightened Treb, who's more like a Wayne Dyer type guy. So that's the book in a nutshell.
Wow. I'm going to have to read it again now because now I'm going to be reading. What else did Corey do? So I have a different perspective for it, which is very cool. So those life lessons, what do you want people to take away from the book? I mean, if they can get one lesson from it, or is that going to give away too much?
No, not at all. There's multiple lessons. So there's two sides of that question. On one hand, I would like them to take away, we all can continue to keep growing. We all get a do-over. We can learn more and grow. It could be as simple as maybe half your life, like me, you didn't have a purpose. You didn't feel like you had passions. And then all of a sudden, the second half of your life, so far, you get a do-over, and now you have a purpose, a meaning, and you feel like a different person. So I want people to know that that's possible. But if I focus on lessons from the book, one lesson that I think I'll really quickly give two quick lessons, so it gives you two different frames of the book. On one hand, there's the side where I talk about the mayfly, and it's a fly that I didn't know anything about, but I heard on an episode of Everybody Loves Raymond how this mayfly, how long it lived. And so I found out the male mayfly lives 24 hours, the female lives 3 to 5 minutes, long enough to have other mayflies. And so obviously I wasn't going to say to people, how would you live if you only had 3 to 5 minutes? Because it's too short. So in the book, it's posed the question, Treb poses to Robert, what would you do on your last day? This is your last day, what would you do? And then Robert goes through all the stuff he would do. And then Treb says, well, I have a follow-up question. Why aren't you doing that now? And the idea is it's a reflective, like, what's your perfect day? So even though it says last day, it's the idea of marking down all the things you would do in a perfect day and how can you incorporate some of those things into your life starting today. So that's like a reflective lesson in the book. There's also a very direct practical lesson, like the power of no, how I've interviewed so many thought leaders and I've learned they say no on average 20 to 30 times or more than the average person. And so I talk in the book about how we can say no, how we can find out what a no is, how we start building the muscle to say no, all those kind of things. And then if I go to another thing in the book, we talk about the power of synchronicity for business. So in other words, meaningful coincidence. How can you lean into them so that you grow as a person? Or how can you lean into them so that they impact your business or your career? And so that, for those, again, that don't know, synchronicity, some people call it a coincidence. I say if you're going to call it a coincidence, let's call them meaningful coincidences, the ones that have meaning. You can ascribe a meaning to it and live your life accordingly. So I say that honestly because that's 3 different things in the book that tell you how far the book reaches, because one's a spiritual topic, one's very practical, and one's a reflective topic about how we're living our life. So hopefully that gives you a feel for the book.
I love those perspectives. That's so cool. And as you were saying this, I thought, oh, yeah, I did do a podcast episode on finding your purpose, because I think during the pandemic, especially, a lot of people who had an idea of their purpose lost it. Things got changed around, and some people are still searching for that purpose. Some people feel that they don't have one, and I would argue that everybody has one. It's just a question of, have you recognized it yet? So your book is definitely speaking to that and saying, well, these are some ways you can go figure that out, right? You can go find it. And I love the idea of, what's your best day or your last day. In fact, I've used that myself a few times, because if you know it's your last day, would you be doing what you're doing right now? It's kind of the approach I take of, if you hate your job or you don't like this thing or you're putting up with something, would you be doing that if it was your last day? And if the answer is no, well, then, what would you do instead? And maybe go do that. And it's just to shift perspective a little, to kind of give somebody a jolt out of the same old, because I think it's downright criminal to get to the end of your life and having not lived it, but just repeated the day over and over again, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's something that I get out of reading your book too, is that it's a bit of a jolt here and there, a gentle one, but it's like, hey, poke, poke, poke. Have you thought about this? Are you paying attention? Are you looking at this? So if you haven't got the book yet, it's The Enlightened Passenger, The Flight That Changes Everything by Corey Poirier, and you need to go get it. Corey, just before the break, can you tell people where they can find this? It's on Amazon, right? But where else can they get it?
I mean, it's on Amazon. It's on all the places, but if you go to thisisthebook.com, which is kind of the main website for it, one of the benefits is there's a bunch of cool bonuses that come with it. And so there's 5 free instant bonuses you get. The great part is you're still going to be able to go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or wherever you want to buy it, because the link is there. It says here, go buy it there. You don't buy it from us. We don't ship it or anything. You're still buying it from the same place. The price is still the same. But if you go through our website, it tells you where to put an order number, and that allows us to give you instant bonuses. And so I would say go to thisisthebook.com. On top of that, when you go to Amazon, you read a little bit about the book. But if you go to the thisisthebook.com, you'll find a little bit about me, about the book, about my background, all that kind of stuff. So there's more to be had on that page as well.
Perfect. And we have yet another break. Believe it or not, this is going so fast. It's almost like you're on a flight somewhere, right? So don't go away. We will be back right after the break. You were listening to Michaela Gaffen Stone and Corey Poirier, and we're having an amazing conversation here. So I hope you're enjoying it too. See you in a minute.
What if your relationships could be a source of delight instead of a source of struggle? In a world where human interactions are anything but straightforward, tuning in to Navigating Complicated Relationships with behavior expert Michaela Gaffen Stone will offer you insights, tools, and a whole new level of understanding for you to use right now. Listen for Navigating Complicated Relationships with Michaela Gaffen Stone, Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Mountain, 9 a.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. This is Navigating Complicated Relationships with Michaela Gaffen Stone. To participate in the program, join the live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also send an email to mickey@gaffenstone.com. Now back to the program.
Welcome back. I'm so glad you're still here. And I just want to remind you, if you want to email me, it's mikki@gaffenstone.com. So do email me. I love to get emails. I'm very responsive to them. And you can also find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. Corey, I would like you to take this opportunity to tell people where they can find you and what kind of things are you up to that they might want to have a look at.
Yeah, so I mean, outside of the book and kind of what I've been doing with writing over the years, and we talked about speaking a little bit. The thing that I spend most of my time focused on now is a brand that we have called Blue Talks. You're a part of it, so you know full well about it. But essentially, in a short, super quick nutshell, basically we designed it originally to give platforms to people to help them build up their credibility, their authority, their influence, and to have things like being able to say they're a TEDx speaker, or that they're a best-selling author, or that they've spoken at in Oxford or Cambridge or UCLA. And we're trying to help people. Like when I first started, the stuff I didn't have, we're trying to help people get those things earlier on. So I learned over the years from a positioning point of view, if on your bio you can say you co-authored best-selling books, you've spoken at certain places, people take you more seriously. They consider you more for opportunities. So we're basically aiming to bring people those opportunities in a nutshell. So Blue Talks, there's two ways, obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, there's two ways to find out more about Blue Talks. The obvious one is Google Blue Talks or go to bluetalks.com. I will say the bluetalks.com site is not one that we regularly update, but that's why I say you could Google it as well. Or I don't do this often, and I'm going to stop doing this soon. The other option is you can email me at Corey, Corey, at Blue Talks, and it's BLU Talks, TALKS with an S on the end there, .com. So Corey at bluetalks.com. Message me, say hi, and we can connect that way as well.
And if you do that, I would love you to let Corey know that you heard him on this podcast, and that's why you're hitting him up on email, because if he's going to stop it soon, you might want to know where it came from and where the person heard you, and then that gives you an idea of maybe the inspiration that got them to contact you. Corey and I both love to get contact, so do send us emails and message. You can find Corey on Facebook too. He's all over the place, and you can look up Blue Talks on Facebook, and that's all over the place. So there's lots of possibilities there for contact. And you very briefly mentioned TED Talks. So we are coming to the end of the show, but we have a few minutes for you to talk about your experience as a TEDx speaker, and why you would recommend that for people. And who you'd recommend it for?
Yeah, well, I've done 5. The 5th one hasn't aired, to my knowledge. I haven't even, it's weird. When it was the first one, I was like every day, like, when's it coming out? And Even the fourth one, I was kind of doing that, but for whatever reason, I've just reached a point in my life where I'm like, it'll come out when it's meant to come out. And so I haven't asked a word about it. I just, when somebody tells me it's out, or I eventually Google it and see it's out. But I've done 5. They changed my career, my life, everything. Now, I can't say equally they all did, but doing one changed everything. Then being able to say I was a multiple time TEDx speaker changed everything again. And the fourth one I think it's 250,000 views, and that really helps as well, because the other ones are like 40,000, 30,000. So you think about, you're hitting 300,000, 400,000 people with your message. That's very powerful. But it's a legacy talk in a lot of ways. It's that thing when people see you, they go, "You're a TED speaker?" Like, that's a huge deal. And so to answer your question, who is it for? I think anybody that's either an entrepreneur, solopreneur, expert, healer, speaker, coach, anybody that kind of does their own thing that way, I would say it's for. And anybody who ultimately wants to build a speaking career, I would say it's for. And any entrepreneur, I would say it's for. And the reason I say that is because the credibility that comes with it, you'll be able to, I use the word leverage a lot, leverage it for all aspects of your life. So, if you do a TED talk, let's say, like, start Simon Sinek. I mean, one of the biggest viewed TED talks of all time. Start with why. I mean, it built his entire business, right? Like, it built his coaching and consulting business. It built his speaking business. It sold him a lot of books. I think it brought the book to the New York Times bestseller list. And that all started with a TED talk. And so for me, it's what it can do for you. It's the fact that the credibility that comes with it, even if yours doesn't go viral, you still get to carry that credibility around forever. It's equivalent to saying you spoke at an event or at a place like Harvard or Columbia or Cambridge. It's got a certain cachet. Or if you're an Emmy winner, it's got a certain cachet that you're not going to find in many other places. So I would say it'll help you boost your career. It'll give you a legacy talk that people will know you for forever. It's something that will help you probably increase your income, increase the amount of clients that you can bring on. I can't say enough about all the things that it's done for my business and my career. And just to summarize it, I will say I've done interviews with really big names where when I did the interview, they said, "Oh, I saw your TEDx talk and loved it." And they saw it on my email signature. And I realize now they probably said yes to the interview solely because I was a TEDx speaker.
No, that's powerful. And something I want to pick up on and point out to people is this is something to strive for. The attitude that you have on your 5th talk is like, okay, it'll come out when it comes out. That's like #life goals, right? You get to the place where you're not staring at your screen every day waiting for it to happen. And I love that shift through those talks. Like, that sounds so cool. And I think if you want to be a speaker, there's ways to get there. So have a word with Corey, send him that email and see if that's going to be a good path for you. And I can say from personal experience, just because you currently don't like the idea of getting up in front of an audience, it doesn't mean you never will. If I hadn't done a talk at MIT, I would not be doing this podcast, which I've been doing for a year now. So, it gave me the oomph to sort of say, hey, actually, I like talking. I could talk all day. And I do, and here I am on this podcast. And it's great fun for me. So this is a really good medium. And I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't taken the leap and done that talk at MIT, which was nerve-wracking. But you got to step out of your comfort zone sometime. So we're really coming to the end of this show already. It's, a 55-minute show, just kind of flies by. Pun intended, because we're talking about The Enlightened Passenger today by Corey Poirier. And I recommend you go get it and tell them that website again, the one that's got the bonuses.
Yeah, it's ThisIsTheBook.com.
And that is the perfect place to leave The Enlightened Passenger for today. Thank you so much for coming, Corey. This has been a fun interview. I've learned loads about you. And I think maybe some of the listeners will have as well. And now they can go read your book again if they've already read it. And if they haven't read it, they need to go get it and have a look. It's a fun read. Everybody else, I will see you next week. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for listening to the Navigating Complicated Relationships show. Michaela returns Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Mountain, 9 a.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. Until then, remember every relationship is a journey, and with the right tools, you can create stronger, more fulfilling connections.